This is Cyclestorm for Beginners. Everything you need to know about my favorite Pauper combo deck. Let's go check it out. Before we begin, let's take a moment and thank Matthew Story for this donation deck, and the idea for this video was actually theirs. They are getting into Pauper Cyclestorm and they wanted a beginner video, so that's exactly what we're doing today. So if you're new to the deck, this will be a great video to watch. If you're very familiar, maybe skip ahead to the matches, but we're going to do a deep dive on the deck tech today, along with more thorough gameplay explaining things a little bit more than I normally would. Alright, so the concept behind this deck is that you're a cycling strategy with things like Imposing Vantasaur, Monstrous Carabid, Street Wraith, Horror of the Broken Lands, Drannith Healer, and then our win condition, Drannith Stinger. And I say win condition because you don't need anything like Consume Spirit or that card from Weatherlight where you exile cards from your graveyard and deal damage. Haunting Misery, that's what it's called. So your win condition is actually built into your engine because it cycles for 1 mana, which is really nice because you never have dead cards. So the idea is that you put a bunch of these cycling creatures to the graveyard. Eventually, you'll play some mana spells like, I don't know, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, or a key card in this deck, Songs of the Damned, which makes a black mana for each creature in your graveyard. After you've created a sufficient storm count, you will play Reaping the Graves. This returns all of your cycling creatures like your Imposing Vantasaur and etc. This is how we create card advantage. And then after you've created enough card advantage by cycling into more copies of Reaping the Graves, eventually you'll use your Lotus Petals or your Great Furnace to cast multiple copies of Drannith Stinger, and then you could start cycling more creatures to win the game. And in order to make this more consistent, we play Rowan's Rim Search. This is a bargain spell, which is why we play artifact lands like Great Furnace or Vault of Whispers, that fills up your graveyard while digging 6 cards deep for Songs of the Damned or Reaping the Graves. So it provides consistency, but it also fills up your graveyard, making it a super valuable card. That's the idea behind Reaping the Graves. And honestly, it's a fairly linear strategy, but has a lot of complex gameplay to it, which is why we're interested in doing a beginner's video to begin with. In the sideboard, we have a Blood Celebrant. This might not seem obvious to those that aren't familiar, but Weather the Storm is a very popular sideboard card in Pauper. So in order to beat Weather the Storm, we have this Blood Celebrant, which allows you to play out all 4 copies of your Drannith Stingers off of 1 mana source, and then you just start pinging for 4 with each cycle. This will eventually allow you to beat Weather the Storm naturally. We have Duress. This is in order to beat things like Thraben Charm, for example. And when you look at our sideboard, it's mostly to beat Graveyard Hate because we're an all-in Graveyard deck in game number 1. So that's the idea there. And then, speaking of more Graveyard Hate, we have Siege Smash. This destroys Relic of Progenitus or Nile Spellbomb. That's why we would play it, but it also has the secondary effect of pumping up Horror of the Broken Lands and giving it Trample. Horror of the Broken Lands is the backup win condition. If your opponent has too much Graveyard Hate, we go Beatdown. That's the idea behind this card. And giving it Trample is an easy way to win the game. Speaking of going Beatdown, our sideboard has Chitin Gravestalkers in it. It cycles for 2 mana, which is maybe 1 more than we would like, but it allows you to pivot and beat Graveyard Hate in post-board games. This card is primarily for those blue strategies. I don't really bring it in against non-blue decks. And then we have 2 copies of Fairy Macabre. These are for opposing graveyard decks like Dredge or these Spy combo decks in the format. One important thing about this deck, you do not want to over sideboard because if you do, you're diluting your own combo. So we never bring in too many cards, which is why you only see a couple copies of each effect. And then we have Pyroblast once again for those blue decks, and then a basic swamp. I get asked all the time, why is this in your sideboard? Well, it could be in your main deck, I just don't think it's valuable enough there. Cleansing Wildfire is a popular Pauper card, and in order to not get blown out by it, we would like at least 1 basic land effect to search out. So I keep it in my sideboard. You could play it in the main deck, maybe over the 4th copy of Barrenmoor, which cycles, which is super valuable, so that way you're not going to fizzle nearly as often. And you could play it there, but I think having the cycling consistency is more important than a searchable land off of Cleansing Wildfire. That's my opinion, my 2 cents. You could disagree and swap. You're not going to hurt my feelings. But that is the deck tech. Hopefully it all made sense to you. If you have any questions on the deck tech, put those down below, and I'll answer them at a later date. But for now, we're going to hop on into match number 1, and I will see you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. You can also show your support by becoming a member of this channel. You get sweet perks such as badges, emotes, early access to videos, exclusive members only content, and access to our members Discord section. As you increase the tiers, there are other rewards such as shop discounts, sideboard guides, and even free donation decks. Click the join button down below to find out more. We also have other ways you can support us, like theepicstorm.com/shop or submitting a donation deck via theepicstorm.com/donation decks. That's enough for now. Let's play some Magic. Welcome to match number 1. We are on the play with Pauper Cycle Storm. Once again, this is a beginner's focused video, so I'm going to do my best to explain everything to you. And here we have a hand without any cycling creatures. That said, we do have the glue of the deck, Rowan's Grim Search, to dig for, those cycling creatures, but also Reaping the Graves. I'm actually going to keep this. I know that some people are afraid to keep hands without cycling creatures. I believe that this hand is just fine. Also, a friendly reminder for you, we do have a sideboard guide available over at theepicstorm.com/shop, and for $10 you can know how I sideboard in every single matchup, so go check that out. It's definitely worth the money. Alright, so we're on the play. I'm going to lead on a Vault of Whispers here, so that way I can cycle the Baron more. Dig for those creatures. Our opponent has an Urza's Tower into Expedition map, so this is likely Altertron if I had to take a wild guess. We'll cycle the Baron more. Street Wraith is a good find. We'll play the Great Furnace, pass. Seagate, okay. They choose green. We'll cycle the Street Wraith. Imposing Vantasaur is a good draw. I'm going to tap the Great Furnace in order to cycle this because we do play Horror of the Broken Lands, and if I were to draw Horror of the Broken Lands, I want the ability to cycle it. So I could play a Rowan's Grim Search here, but I don't think it's actually any different than casting it on my main phase if I was interested in doing that. So this Altertron deck occasionally plays Crop Rotation into Bojuka Bog, so I'm highly incentivized to try to win right now. So we'll play a Dark Ritual, tap the Great Furnace, and now we will play Rowan's Grim Search, and I'm going to use the red mana, and then we'll bargain away the Great Furnace. Alright, so we find another Rowan's Grim Search and a Songs of the Damned. No creatures at all, which is a little concerning, but I think I'm still going to keep this. These two cards are too pivotal to put in the graveyard. I do now have Threshold. So even though Rowan's Grim Search did not find creatures, it did put cards to the graveyard. So now this Cabal Ritual will make 5 mana. We can cast another copy of Rowan's Grim Search. Looking to bargain the Vault of Whispers. We'll keep the Dark Ritual, and this one will put 2 creatures to the graveyard. We'll play the Dark Ritual, cycle Horror of the Broken Lands, cycle Imposing Vantasaur. We'll play out Lotus Petal, cast Cabal Ritual. Alright, so Storm is currently 8. We have enough to cast Reaping the Graves here and return everything in our graveyard. So I'm going to target a creature that is not Street Wraith. That is the first thing I do. And then I generally target Street Wraith first. This is because it cycles for free and allows you to dig deeper into your library only using life total as a resource. Alright, so currently Songs of the Damned would make 6 mana if I cast it. And now I'm going to cycle Street Wraith. So it's going to put itself back to the graveyard. And this way, the Songs of the Damned always make the most mana possible. If you return all creatures and then start cycling, these will make less mana. We want them to make the most mana possible. So I'm going to return and cycle, and now we'll cycle again. Okay, and I hit another cycling creature, so now we can cycle a Drannith Healer into a Cabal Ritual. Songs of the Damned now makes 8 mana. So now I can cast that for 8 mana instead of 6 because I cycled with these on the stack. Now we're digging for a Reaping the Graves, but we only have 2 of them left because I was forced to put one to the graveyard earlier off of the Rowan's Grim Search. And now we'll cycle again. Cycle again. We have all the mana in the world. What I need is a Reaping the Graves. Okay, we will cycle. Barrenmore, cycle that. We'll cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands. And there we go. I believe we have won game number 1 now. So I cast Cabal Ritual to make 5 mana. We can now just, I could return everything here if I wanted to. Another Cabal Ritual, wow. Okay. I'll play the Dark Ritual, I suppose, Storm 13. And now the original copy will resolve returning the Imposing Vantasaur. We'll cycle the Stinger. We'll cycle that. I thought briefly about holding it for a moment, so that way I could cast it, but I don't have 2 Lotus Petals, and there's already a Stinger in the graveyard. So we're going to play our 3 copies of Songs of the Damned. 43 mana, no big deal. And now we'll target a creature, going down to 40 mana. And we could start cycling in order to return everything, but I am not going to do that. I'm going to... that did not make sense. I could target street rates first and then cycle, dig deeper, but we're ready to win the game. And there's no point in cycling any further because we're at the stage of the game where it's time to go. It's time to deal your opponent lethal. We have 40 mana, we have a red mana. It's time to just deal damage. So no point in cycling with these on the stack because we have everything we need. Alright, so now we'll make a red, we'll play the Drannith Stinger, and we have more than enough mana to ping our opponent out. The requirement here is actually cycling creatures, and we have a lot of them, so I think we'll be fine. You'll notice that there's two triggers that go on the stack. There's the damage trigger and then the cycle trigger. I'm going to auto yield to the cycle trigger, but you have the ability to respond to those. So sometimes it comes up in videos where I will go down to 0 cards in library, and then I will start cycling. And people ask, how do you do that? Why didn't you deck yourself? Because there's actually a damage trigger and then a cycling draw trigger. You can keep on responding to that draw trigger in order to win the game. So actually, let me undo the... Is it going to let me? No, our opponent conceded. Okay, but so there's two triggers that go on the stack. There's the damage trigger from Drannith Stinger and then the draw trigger from one of your cycling creatures. You just respond to the draw trigger if you no longer want to draw cards, if your library was empty. So that is game number 1. We've defeated Altertron. This is a deck that often has Nile Spellbombs in it, so I like the Siege Smash. They named green, which tells me that they have Crop Rotation Bazooka Bog, so I'm somewhat interested in Duress, but I don't want to over-sideboard. So I don't think I'm actually going to bring in the Duress. It might be wrong, but that's my thought process here. I want all 4 copies of Rowan's Grim Search, so I think the thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to shave 1 Imposing Vantasaur and 1 Cabal Ritual. Imposing Vantasaur is arguably your worst cycler, because Horror of the Broken Lands, while it only cycles for black, is your plan B. If you need to go beat down, it is an option that you have, and I like having that option open. So I will board out the Imposing Vantasaur, and then the Cabal Ritual is a little bit worse in post-board matchups because your opponents have Graveyard Hate. So in order to mitigate that a little bit, we board out the Ritual that is most reliant on the Graveyard. And you might be saying, well, Songs of the Damned is more reliant, which is true, but it's a key requirement for the deck. Like, you can't win without Songs of the Damned. We'll try this. I like having the Siege Smash. We have Reaping the Graves. We can cycle Barrymore and Imposing Vantasaur. There's things to like here, is my point. They have Expedition Map. We'll play Vault of Whispers and pass. Dark Ritual was an okay draw, but we need creatures. They play Urza's Tower, so they will have Tron on the following turn. We'll cycle the Imposing Vantasaur. Maybe I should have done the Barrymore. I wasn't really thinking there. And now I'm punished because I drew another card that only cycles for black mana. So we'll cycle the Barrymore here to see if I can draw another Vault of Whispers. And I am, in fact, punished. So you saw the consequence of lazy play there. I did something on autopilot, and now I cannot cycle. Because the way that you should do it is black mana should cycle black cards. Anything that can cycle off generic mana should be cycled off of Great Furnace. So I lost a draw here. Oh, they're on blue. I thought that they were on Altertron. They're actually on Bluetron. So this Siege Smash is probably a dead card. I think I'll play out the Barrymore. I thought briefly about cycling it, and then ultimately decided against it. Okay, so they're on Bluetron, which is a little different. The Siege Smash is not going to be good. I guess my best hope is that they tap for like an artifact, and then I destroy it, and they don't have blue mana. Cabal Ritual. I'm going to just go to cleanup and get rid of the Siege Smash. They now have Tron. They play another Expedition Map, and they're going to use it immediately. And they find a Seagate. End step. Let's try a Rowan's Grim Search. We'll bargain away the Great Furnace, which you might be saying, why bargain away the red mana? My hand is literally all black cards. And if I want to play double Ritual on a single turn in order to win, I need multiple black mana. They have an Unwind. Okay. We draw a Lotus Petal. I'm actually going to save myself some time here. I boarded incorrectly for the matchup, and our draws were not particularly good. So I am going to just move on to game number 3. I actually really like Chitin Gravestalker in this matchup, so I'm going to bring those in. Get rid of the Siege Smash. I like Duress because it hits their crop rotation that they can get off of Mystical Teachings. And then we'll board out 2 copies of Rowan's Grim Search. we're no longer all in on the combo plan, and it's not as great against counter spells. And then we'll board out another Cabal Ritual because it is a slower matchup. And then all 4 copies of Imposing Vantasaur, and we'll bring in 2 copies of Pyroblast. We will try this. Sometimes it's about knowing when to pivot, and here we were just in a spot where we were never going to win, so why keep on going down that route? All right, I really like this hand. This is a good hand. So we have 2 fast cyclers into the Chitin Gravestalker. So the best thing that could happen is that I draw more creatures to cycle quickly so I can play Chitin Gravestalker on the second turn. There's a lot to like about this hand. We'll play the Vault of Whispers and pass. Once again, we usually cycle on our opponent's end steps because they are a Bazooka Bog deck, and plenty of decks in Pauper are, so you're not really rewarded for cycling on your main phase. In fact, most of the time, it can only punish you if you're not trying to win the game. So we'll cycle a Street Wraith, hoping to hit a creature. We did. And now we'll cycle the Drannith Healer. So that's 2 creatures in the graveyard for our Chitin Gravestalker. We draw another Reaping the Grave, so we'll cycle the Street Wraith into a Dark Ritual, which is pretty good here. We'll cast the Dark Ritual, cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands. So that puts 4 creatures in the graveyard. I can cycle the Stinger, and this gives us 5 creatures. Cycle the Street Wraith. Okay. We hit a land. So now I can play Songs of the Damned for 6 mana. We'll play Chitin Gravestalker for Storm and to just get it on the table. And now I'm going to Songs of the Damned again. 10 mana. We can Reaping the Graves for 5. I want to return the Horror of the Broken Lands. And then we're going to target Street Wraith, Street Wraith, Street Wraith, Drannith Stinger. So I have 8 total mana. I could keep on trying to combo win here, but I think the best thing we can actually do is this. We're going to play Horror of the Broken Lands, and then Drannith Stinger. This is a great example of how you're allowed to pivot. And all of a sudden, on turn 2, we have 11 power on the board, threatening lethal on turn 2, versus a deck that is boarding and counter spells against us. Prophetic Prism, you're dead. Congratulations. All right, let's untap and get in there. Oh, you're not going to let me swing for lethal? Come on. Our opponent has conceded the match. All right, so that was round number 1 of this Cycle Storm for Beginners video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts so far, put them down below. But for now, we're going to hop on into match number 2, and I hope to see you there. Packs.com is the new way to open your favorite cards. It's a site where you open digital packs of trading cards like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, and One Piece cards, and have the cards you open mailed quickly and securely to you. With a wide range of packs to choose from, such as the latest Magic sets, Kaladesh Inventions, or even Beta. I'm going to open a Beta pack. What's great about Packs.com is you can see all of the cards and their odds of being opened in each pack. Now it's time to open one and see what I get. Come on, Black Lotus! If you don't like what you opened, you could sell it back instantly for more packs, or sell it and pick a specific card from the marketplace over at packs.com/market. If you want to check out packs.com, make sure to click the link in the description of this video and use code STORM5 when making a purchase for 5% extra on your first purchase. We're back for the second match, and we're on the draw. We've opened up a hand that has no lands in it. That's a little problematic. We do have a Lotus Petal that could allow you to Dark Ritual and then cycle, but now you're going down multiple resources trying to hit a land when you could just use the engine that's built in the game. So we will take a mulligan here. Oh no. Alright, so now we're down to 6 cards and no land. So this deck uses a lot of resources in order to win. And I think the more you mulligan, the more difficult it becomes to win. Here we have a Street Wraith. So we're on the draw and we get 2 looks at a land. I'm going to choose to keep this. It's a little risky, but I think you have to get lucky to win anyway at 5 cards. So I'm going to just hope for the best off of this very, very playable 6. Because if you hit a land in your top 2 cards, this hand is amazing. They play a Volatile Forward, so they're on Izzet. We'll cycle the Street Wraith. We hit a land. Beautiful. Pass the turn. They play a second tap land. We draw another Songs of the Damned. We'll cycle Horror of the Broken Lands into Vault of Whispers. Boom. Things are shaping up nicely. So at this point, I just want more cycling creatures. That's really all I want. They now cast a Brainstorm. Now they cycle a Lorien Revealed for a snow-covered island. End step will cycle the Imposing Vantasaur. We draw another. Okay. Street Wraith, love it. Okay, cycle the Imposing Vantasaur. Things are looking very good for us here. I don't expect this deck to have main deck graveyard hate, so I'm going to choose to cycle the Street Wraith looking for a land. We did not find one. So I am in a spot where I could beat one piece of interaction. That said, I think I'm going to pass here. I could try to force a win off of a Reaping the Graves for 5, but I just don't know if I need to. That's the big thing here. So I'm going to choose to be a little bit more disciplined and see what my draw step is, because if we can get more creatures, it's even better for us. They play a Brainstorm and a Snow-Covered Island, now a Preordain. They're going to pass with 2 mana open, which represents Counterspell or even Spellstutter Sprite. We'll play Dark Ritual, and now we'll cycle a Drannith Stinger. We will attempt a Cabal Ritual. This is a pretty juicy Counterspell target. They did not bite. We'll try another Cabal Ritual. Lotus Petal. Storm is now 4. We're going to do a trick here. So we want to return all 6 cards with Reaping the Graves, and Songs of the Damned making 6 is not the most desirable. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold priority and cast this Songs of the Damned. This is spell number 5. This is not resolved. With this still in the stack, I'm going to cast Reaping the Graves. So when this eventually resolves, it will make more than 6 mana. Now we'll return Street Wraith, and then the other creatures. So now Street Wraith will return first, as I mentioned, and now we can cycle it for free, putting more creatures to our graveyard. And now we'll cycle the Monstrous Carabid. So now, as you'll see, Songs of the Damned says 7, which is just great. We'll play the Cabal Ritual, cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands, cycle Imposing Vantasaur. We drew another Imposing Vantasaur, we'll cycle that. The Lotus Petal's the draw. Now we'll return the Imposing Vantasaur into a Drannith Stinger, we'll cycle that. And now we will... So I'm getting low on mana. It's actually a concern of mine here that they'll counterspell the Songs of the Damned. So it now makes 9 mana. Effectively 3 mana we got for free by better sequencing. This is on the stack. I'm now going to pass priority. It resolved. So I guess our opponent just has nothing. But I could have cycled the Monstrous Carabid. Then I'd have to sacrifice my Lotus Petal and I'd have less red mana. I don't want that. So now we'll cycle the Monstrous Carabid into another Songs of the Damned. Wow. We'll play the Vault of Whispers, Lotus Petal. I'm at the point where I'm going to win the game very shortly. We'll sacrifice a Vault of Whispers to Rowan's Grim Search. I guess we'll take a Reaping the Graves. I don't need anything else here. Cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. Cycle the Stinger. Cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. We'll play Songs of the Damned for 14, 14, and 14. A ton of mana here. And now we're going to Reaping the Graves and return almost our entire graveyard. So the order at this point does not matter because we're just going to win the game. Okay, so we're leaving one of our friends in the graveyard. It's unfortunate, but you know, sometimes you don't have sufficient storm count. So our opponent has not played a counter spell yet. I'm willing to bet that they're holding removal then, and we're going to just play 2 copies of Stinger. If they both resolve, we can ping them more easily. If they respond with creature removal, we can cycle in response and kill them. So our opponent waited too long. They needed to respond to the first one. Alright, so with this still on the stack, we're going to cycle again and just kill them in response. They have another removal spell here. And once again, we're going to just kill them in response. Creature removal is not very effective against Cycle Storm. Because the fact that cycling is an instant speed ability, you never have to let this stuff resolve. Okay. And at this point, it's just cycling until your opponent's life total is 0. Just keep cycling. Cycle a Barrenmore. I always find it fun to kill my opponents using lands. So with the last cycle being Barrenmore, you get a little bit more flavor out of it. Our opponent down to 6 life. Now down to 4. 2 with that cycle. And now we'll cycle the Barrenmore as the last one. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Alright, so we get game number 1 versus what I'm guessing is Izzet Terror? Okay, so we probably want the Chitin Gravestalkers. And we likely want Pyroblast. I am checking out the handy dandy sideboard guide because past Bryant was a lot smarter than current Bryant. And I trust past Bryant to make good decisions. So past Bryant says we board out 3 copies of Imposing Vantasaur, 2 copies of Rowan's Grim Search, and 2 Cabal Ritual. Pretty similar to match number 1. We're just not bringing in the Duress. You don't bring in Duress just because your opponent is on a blue deck. That's not how our sideboard is built. We have Pyroblast for that. Pyroblast is more effective. Pyroblast forces your opponent to spend resources, being their mana, in order to cast the spell. If you play Duress and your opponent's revealing 2 counter spells, and then you go, oh, well, they only had one mana, or they only had enough mana to cast one, it doesn't help you. Where if they spend the mana to cast a counter spell and then you Pyroblast it, they now don't have that mana to do something else. So Pyroblast tends to be a lot better in these matchups. And Duress is really for things like Weather the Storm, Thraben Charm, Crop Rotation into Bazooka Bog, things like that. So our deck is how we want it. We're going to resubmit here. Reasonable Hand will keep. They play a Volatile Forward again on the first turn. We'll play out the Great Furnace. Actually, hold on, Barrenmore, we'll play that. So I like leading on the Barrenmore here because these decks tend to play Cast into the Fire in the sideboard. So I was worried about the Great Furnace being exiled. Now I'm less concerned because we have this other mana source. We'll play the Great Furnace and pass. Next step, they play a Brainstorm. Now they're likely... Ooh, I was going to say cycling Lorien Revealed, but it appears that they're digging for land number 3. Did you find it? They did. And here's the Cast into the Fire. I'm going to cycle the Street Wraith and see what my draws are like, because we might, and I say might, want to Rowan's Grim Search that away. I'd have to draw it, which there's only 2 in the deck. It's fairly improbable. And I actually drew Ritual Rowan's Grim Search. How insane is that? Just perfects. Okay. Just really punishing our opponent here. Bargain away the Great Furnace. I want the Chitin Gravestalker. We're going to play double Gravestalker on our turn. This is disgusting. Wow. We're going to punish our opponent real bad. They have 5 cards in hand. Oh, my bad. We're going to play triple Gravestalker. Songs of the Damned. Songs of the Damned. Chitin Gravestalker costs 1. We'll play that. Now we'll play this. We'll play this one. And now we'll play Horror of the Broken Lands. Pass the turn. Our opponent goes to their turn, draws, and concedes. Nice. Alright, well, Cycle Storm looking very good so far, and we are now 2-0.
Building a new deck usually means getting hit with a dozen different shipping fees from a dozen different sellers. It adds up fast, and honestly, it's the worst part of buying cards. That's why I switched to Card Trader Zero. You shop their global marketplace, but instead of having every seller ship to you, they ship to Card Trader's hub first. Card Trader then packs everything into a single shipment for you, and it saves a small fortune on shipping fees. This package from Card Trader just arrived. These are 4 Dark Rituals that came from 4 different sellers, but they all arrived in one envelope, and every card was quality checked by the Card Trader team before it hit my door. Check out the link in the description to try Card Trader Zero's optimizer for yourself. Stop paying for multiple shipments and get just one.
It is time for the third match, and we're on the play. Hopefully we get a good one. Let's see it, and it's fine. So this hand is a little bit slow, but you have mana sources, you have cyclers. Songs of the Damned is obviously a valuable card. I think it's fine. My only concern with this hand is speed. So having double tap land is not desirable. You also don't have artifacts in case they're... Ooh, what are you playing? In case for Rowan's Grim Search. I'm going to start by cycling Horror of the Broken Lands and see if we can find an untapped land. I did not, so I'll play the Barrenmore and I will pass. Once again, cycling the Horror of the Broken Lands here, so that way, if I need to get stuck, or if they're on Rally Red, the fastest version, I open up on a slow hand. But you want to use black mana to cycle black, because red mana cannot cycle this later. Alright, so we need to hit some good draws here. We'll cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands. Rowan's Grim Search. We'll cycle Imposing Vantasaur. We did not hit the land. We have to pass. Okay, so assuming we even get another turn, turn 4 we have to win. So that is where we're at right now. They have a Voldaran Epicure. I'm at 15. Goblin Bushwhacker. That's a lot. I'm at 4. 4 is more than 0. Alright, so we're going to start with a Dark Ritual. Cycle Monstrous Carabid. Cycle Imposing Vantasaur. This is 6 cards in graveyard. We hit a Great Furnace. That gives us a Bargainable. We'll cycle the Monstrous Carabid. We draw a Barrenmore. Play the Great Furnace. Cast the Cabal Ritual with Threshold. We will cycle Barrenmore here into a card I can't use. Okay, well, I can't use right now, at least. If I happen to hit a Drannith Healer, later I can use the Rowan's Grim Search. We'll play out the Lotus Petal, and we will Rowan's Grim Search, bargain the Great Furnace. We hit Reaping the Graves. That's actually fantastic. Only 1 creature to the graveyard, but I'll take Finding Reaping the Graves. I cannot use Street Wraith. We'll play Songs of the Damned for 7 mana. So, We're in another spot where I need Storm, but if I cast Songs of the Damned and then Reaping the Graves, I'm only going to have 3 mana floating. And I cannot use my life total as a resource here. So I think I'm actually going to just cast the Songs of the Damned and then Reaping the Graves. So this will return all 7 creatures in the graveyard. Finding a Drannith Healer would be huge. Another Lotus Petal, cycle the Horror, another Street Wraith. Come on, Drannith Healer. Okay, well, now we just need more mana. Like, even if I find Healer, I don't think I'm allowed to play it. So if I would go to 7, up to 7 mana, down to 5. Maybe I should. All right, we're going to return everyone here because it unlocks the Drannith Healer, unlocks the Street Wraiths. So I'll make a white, play the Healer, and now I can cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. This puts me up to 3, and that unlocks 1 Street Wraith cycle. So I'll go down to 1. Okay. And now we'll cycle Imposing Vantasaur. I'm at 3. Cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. We need mana here. That's not mana. Cycle Street Wraith. Another Lotus Petal. I will play the Petal. So you could Rowan's Grim Search and bargain. I think that's a bad idea because you're down to 1 Lotus Petal left to win the game with. And then you'd actually need it in order to cast the Songs of the Damned to keep going. So I'm going to just cycle the Monstrous Carabid here up to 4. That is not it. Cycle another Monstrous Carabid. Dark Ritual, okay. We'll play that. So you could Reaping the Graves right now, and then cycle double Street Wraith, hoping to spike a Songs of the Damned. But it's actually better to just cycle the creatures in your hand because it keeps Cabal Ritual open. So we'll cycle, and there's Songs of the Damned. I think we just won. Alright, I'm up to 7. Play the Songs of the Damned. And now we will Reaping the Graves, Healer, and our opponent just conceded. So this was a great example of why we don't play anything in the sideboard that gains life. You just got to see Drannith Healer do work, where a lot of people, it's a frequent question in the comment section, but also the Storm Discord. By the way, that Storm Discord link is in the description down below if you're interested in joining. People say, why don't you play Weather the Storm? Weather the Storm requires you to spend resources like Lotus Petal. That's the green mana for Weather the Storm. You then need to create Storm Count, so Dark Ritual, Songs of the Damned, Cabal Ritual, Rowan's Grim Search. If you cast this, you're now sacrificing permanent mana sources just to gain life with Weather the Storm. If you're going to do all of this, why not just try to win the game? And then if you put Weather the Storm in your deck, you're more likely to fizzle the game anyway. You don't want to fizzle, you just want to win. So I don't think Weather the Storm belongs in this deck whatsoever. So the other card you could play, and I've played it in the past, is Dahada's Ploy. It's 1 generic blue-black, so 3 mana total for an instant. You draw 2 cards and then discard a card. Then you gain a life for each card you discarded this turn. When you look at cycling, it says discard this card, draw a card. So for each card you cycle plus the 1 off of Dahada's Ploy, you'll gain 1 life. Okay, well that's built into the deck. It doesn't cause you to fizzle. I understand wanting to play that. But it still has the same problem of you now have to spend a bunch of resources in order to make it efficient at gaining life. That's not what we want to be doing, especially when you have this built-in life gain engine in your deck. So I don't believe in playing Weather the Storm or or Dahada's Ploy in the deck at this point anymore. I have found that my win percentage is higher without those cards. And it's actually also higher without any copy of Siege Smash coming in. So you might be saying, yeah, but these decks play Relic of Progenitus in the sideboard. I'm aware of that. But they're also so fast that you can't afford to fizzle. And these cards that you would board in force you to fizzle the game. So I think your best chances are just resubmitting and not sideboarding. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. This is a hand. Keep. Basic Mountain into Goblin Tomb Raider. Okay. Cabal Ritual is a wonderful draw. So at this point, I want Songs of the Damned and Reaping the Graves. Those are pretty much the only thing I want. I'd accept more creatures, but they're not required. This is not a good open for this deck. So we'll take 4 here going down to 16. We'll cycle the Monstrous Carabid. You don't really want to put Stingers to the graveyard just for them to be exiled. Dark Ritual is a good draw, so is the Cabal Ritual. Alright, so once again, at this point, I don't even need Songs of the Damned. I just want Reaping the Graves. That's all I want at this point. I'd also take a Rowan's Grim Search. Another Goblin Bushwhacker. Okay. So this is 7 damage coming in. I'll go to 9. End step will cycle Drannith Stinger. We find another Street Wraith. cycle Drannith Stinger. So if we cycle both Street Wraiths, I will go to 5, which means I have to think about burn spells. We hit a Songs of the Damned. We'll cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands, 4 creatures in the graveyard. We'll play Dark Ritual. I'm going to hold these Street Wraiths as long as possible, because Rowan's Grim Search allows us to dig the deepest for the Reaping the Graves that we need. So I'll cycle the Healer here. There's a Rowan's Grim Search. I now have Threshold. Let's cast a Cabal Ritual. And I will now Rowan's Grim Search with the Bargain. This will put me down to 7 life. Ooh. So we'll be getting rid of double Lotus Petal here. But I think we have to, because I just need a Reaping the Graves. So we're going to put all 4 cards to the graveyard. 2 more creatures. We'll cycle these. So we just dug 6 cards deep for Reaping the Graves. Like, that's why Rowan's Grim Search is so good. It digs very deep while filling up your graveyard. So we're down to 2 mana now. We hit the Reaping the Graves. Lovely. Alright, so we'll play Cabal Ritual. And I can cycle 1 Street Wraith safely. I do not die to a Fire Blast at 5. Now we'll cycle a Monstrous Carabid. Alright, so Rowan's Grim Search, not a great draw here. We'll play Songs of the Damned. It makes 10 mana. And now Reaping the Graves for 7. We have to leave 3 of our friends in the graveyard. We are not interested in returning Street Wraith due to our life total. So I think I would like to return Drannith Healer as one of the last cards, because I'm interested in having it. I just don't want to cycle it early, because if I can play a Lotus Petal and start gaining life, that's what I would like to do. So we'll cycle. Once again, we're doing this so that way you keep your creatures in your deck. Or in your graveyard. I'm sorry, I'm misspeaking. It's not always easy to play and narrate, but you keep your creatures in the graveyard so that way if you draw a Songs of the Damned, it makes the most mana possible. And we need a Songs of the Damned here. We're running out of mana and resources. There's a Lotus Petal. So I think I'm actually going to stop here, because I can play Healer and then start cycling, and that unlocks the Street Wraiths. So we'll play the Furnace, play the Lotus Petal, make a white, Drannith Healer, and now we'll cycle Monstrous Carabid. This will put us up to 6. Another Monstrous Carabid. We'll cycle Street Wraith down to 4. They could try to Fire Blast me here, but I would just respond. Another Imposing Vantasaur. We'll cycle Street Wraith. I'm at 3. Do you want to try to Lightning Bolt me? Do it. Do it. They're pointing it at me. I will cycle Imposing Vantasaur in response. I'm at 4. We can let the Lightning Bolt resolve. I'm at 1. Draw a Lotus Petal. We'll play that. Cycle Monstrous Carabid. I'm at 3. We draw another Reaping the Graves. Okay, so we're at the end of the line. I have to draw a Ritual if I want to win this game. I could Rowan's Grim Search, but I'd have to hit... No, we've actually already hit all 4 Lotus Petals. So it just has to be this one Drannith Stinger draw. I mean, I played it well, but we have not drawn a lot of mana. We did early and then not much since. Here it is, Moment of Truth. Cabal Ritual, that keeps us moving. Cast the Cabal Ritual. So I could Reaping the Graves now. I just need to think about this logically. So Reaping the Graves would leave 2 mana floating. Each Street Wraith cycle is 1 life. So I could cycle 3 Street Wraiths and then 1 other creature. So I could dig 4 cards deep. Rowan's Grim Search actually digs deeper. So we're going to play the Rowan's Grim Search. Bargain away the Great Furnace. We'll take the Cabal Ritual. And then I cannot take the Rowan's Grim Search because I would be at 2 life when this is done resolving. We hit the Songs of the Damned. Beautiful. So we're in a spot where we've used all 4 copies of Lotus Petal, which means I cannot play a Drannith Stinger this turn. That's okay. I think the game plan at this point is no longer to win with Drannith Stinger. It is to play maybe 2 copies of Horror of the Broken Lands and gain life. Okay, so we're returning all of our friends. This is another reason you don't necessarily need something like Blood Celebrant in the main deck. Because even though we've used all 4 of our Lotus Petals, you could still just cast your creatures. We'll play 1 copy of Horror of the Broken Lands, and now another. And we can gain 6 life here going up to 8. Maybe even more if I draw a Ritual at some point. I'm up to 3. Cycle the Monstrous Carabid. Okay, who needs Weather the Storm? You have Drannith Healer. Cycle another Monstrous Carabid. I should check to see if we've drawn any more Rituals. We had a Songs of the Damned and double... We actually had double Songs of the Damned and a Dark Ritual. So I might as well keep cycling. Maybe I'm going to play out some Street Wraiths too. Okay. I want to leave some number of cards in my deck so that way I can still cycle and then swing, but I want to put my life total up so high that even if they were to draw, like, Bolt, Fire Blast, I don't lose. 13 cards still in deck. I'm actually going to cast all of my street rates, I think. Whoops. I was supposed to Songs of the Dam there. That was a punt. Okay. I'm at 10. That was my bad. We will go to cleanup now. I was going to cast the street rates, and then I was talking, and I just didn't do it. So that's my own fault. Alright, so now we'll pass the turn. I'm at 10 life. They play a Ren's Resolve. They hit a Goblin Tomb Raider and a Rally. We will attack with our 2 large creatures. They block. That is fine. Songs of the Dam makes 11. We'll play Songs. Play another Songs. Cast Street Wraith. Cast Street Wraith. Cast Street Wraith. Rowan's Grim Search. Alright, so we're going to return everyone here, and then I'll cycle a couple times just to gain more life. But I'm down to 10 cards in library, so I don't want to overcycle. So I will gain a little bit of life here going up to 11. Great Furnace. We'll play a Stinger. And I will cycle an Imposing Vantasaur. Pass the turn. I'm at 12, they're at 19. They play Reckless Impulse, hitting Experimental Synthesizer and a Goblin Tomb Raider. They play Rally. They'd be wise to not swing. They have 1 card in hand. I think we just attack. So let's say they block these. Maybe we just hold back the Drannith creatures. So we'll swing like this. They do not block the Horror of the Broken Lands. So they're going to let 13 damage through. I can cycle twice, which would be +4, and then +2. So that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's exactly lethal. We'll cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. I believe this is exactly lethal. So they go to 18, we'll draw. Cycle the Vantasaur. Now they go to 17, and they take 17. Yep. Alright, well, that was an interesting game. You got to see a plan B in the matchup and how great Drannith Healer can be against Burn. We're now 3-0. Moxfield.com is the easiest way to build a Magic deck online. They support over 30 formats, including Legacy and many other Eternal formats. There are so many options to view decks the way that you want, from text view to individual cards, mana value, and even card price. There's also light mode and dark mode. My personal favorite feature is card tags. This way you can sort cards by function. Moxfield supports collection tracking, Scryfall search, decklist feedback, and so much more. Follow me on Moxfield.com so you can stay updated on all of my decks. Welcome to the 4th match. On the play. Let's go. Sure. I'm not crazy about this hand. I think the double Rowan's Grim Search is a little awkward, but I like having Street Wraith. We have a land and other cyclers. Like, if the Rowan's Grim Search was a Songs of the Damned or Reaping the Graves, I'd be much happier. Our opponent is mulligan to 4, which tells me that they either have main deck Nile Spellbomb or they're on Spy combo. We'll play Vault of Whispers and pass. Forest, so they're likely Spy combo, and there's the land grant. Winding Way and a Mass Vandal. Mass Vandal could actually be problematic for me. We'll cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. Did not draw a land. Cabal Ritual. We will cycle Horror of the Broken Lands. Did not draw the land. We'll cycle Street Wraith. We are now passing the turn. I really don't want to lose to a mulligan to 3. I would appreciate it if our deck started drawing the things we needed. They play the land, and I'm guessing Winding Way. They do play the Winding Way. So it's interesting. If they chose land and they hit. Wow, I was going to say, if they chose land, they could actually destroy my Vault of Whispers next turn. And they hit one of their 2 remaining lands, which is crazy. We'll draw for turn. It's another Vault of Whispers, thankfully. We will pass. So if they play the Mass Vandal, I can Rowan's Grim Search. I have to get rid of the Cabal Ritual, but it's probably worth it. They play the Mass Vandal. We'll make them target. So they're targeting this Vault of Whispers. We'll cast Cabal Ritual. And now a Rowan's Grim Search bargaining the Vault of Whispers that they're targeting. We'll take Cabal Ritual. And I think that's it. Okay, so that fizzled. They have 2 cards in hand. They have to find the 4th land and a Spy. Vault of Whispers. We could try to go here. I just don't think it's very wise. We don't have a Songs of the Damned. We don't have Reaping the Graves. We're putting a lot of pressure on Rowan's Grim Search. X being Guardian. They swing for 1. End step will cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands. Cycle Drannith Healer. There's land number 3. Okay, so now is a time in which I think it might not be unreasonable to try to win. We're a third of the way through the deck. We've seen 1 Cabal Ritual for mana. So we'll cast the Cabal Ritual. And then Rowan's Grim Search with the bargain, sacrificing a Vault of Whispers. We'll take Songs of the Damned. And then, this is close. We have 5 draws to hit. Am I crazy for getting rid of the 3rd Rowan's Grim Search? I'm going to take the Cabal Ritual. If I fizzle, it's going to be my own fault. But the Songs of the Damned only make 6 mana. That's not a ton. So I think the ability to cycle these creatures is more valuable. And that's what I'm going to do here. Cycle the Street Wraith. Cycle the Healer. We'll cycle Monstrous Carabid. Our next card is likely going to be the Songs. I could use the red mana here in order to make 1 extra black. But I still have 3 Songs left in the bottom 50% of my deck. So I think I'm going to keep the red mana open. We'll cycle Imposing Vantasaur. Cycle the Drannith Stinger. Cycle Drannith Stinger. Cycle the Healer. Over 50% of our deck. Okay, we hit another Rowan's. That's good. We'll cast that. So this is going to bring us down to 66%. And we did not hit a Reaping the Graves. So if I take the Songs of the Damned, which I think I have to, we'll get 1 random card. And then we have the 1 Drannith Stinger card. So all 4 copies of Reaping the Graves appear to be in the bottom third of the deck. Okay, so we're at 21 cards right now. This cycle will bring us down to 20. It's down to the very last cycle. Cycle Drannith Stinger. 66% of the way through the deck. No Reaping the Graves. We bricked. We have to pass. If our opponent has Spy, we lose. That's crazy. That's like really bad variance. They play Lead the Stampede. They did find a Balustrade Spy. Alright, deck. Don't fail me. Wow. That's insane. We lost to a mulligan to 3 because our deck had the worst variance. That is insane. All 4 Reaping the Graves in the bottom 18 cards. It was our next card. 1 more draw could have done it. So there were decisions we could have made to turn this into a winning game. I don't know if they were correct decisions. I think the only one that you could really argue was keeping the Cabal Ritual over the Rowan's Grim Search. My issue with that is that Songs of the Damned didn't make mana at the time. It made 6 mana. That's not really enough to keep going. And we had 5 draws in our hand. I think you're supposed to believe that your average situation will happen, which is that you draw your cards at an even distribution. So, yeah, we lost. That happens sometimes in Magic, but I don't know if I made a mistake here. Like, I don't think I did. I think we were just a victim of our deck being randomized in a order that didn't favor us. So, it happens. We lost game number 1 against a mulligan to 3, and now we're going to bring in our 2 copies of Fairy Macabre. And we'll sideboard out 2 copies of Imposing Vantasaur. On the play. Sure. So, this hand's a little odd. We only have 1 cycling creature and we don't have black mana. But, I mean, this is most of the things we would like. So I'm going to keep it. We'll play Great Furnace and pass. Basic Forest. And they play a Land Grant. They have the Balustrade Spy. Now they use the Sagu Wildling for a Mountain. You don't see that too often. Okay, that's a little spicy. We'll cycle the Healer. We draw Street Wraith. Not a bad draw. Okay, that was pretty good. Now we'll pass. Surprised by the inclusion of the Mountain. I don't know what that would be for. Like Ancient Grudge? Glaring Pain? They're using the Gatecreeper Vine. They grab another Forest. We'll cycle the Street Wraith. We find another copy of Fairy Macabre. This is going to be a little insane. I think No, I'll just take a draw step. I think Dark Ritual Rowan's is not good there. Alright, we'll pass. They play Swamp from hand. They did not search out the swamp. Now they lead the Stampede. So you boarded up a land, which makes it more difficult for you to combo. They find Mesmeric Fiend. I'm going to Dark Ritual, but I think I'm going to Rowan's Grim Search now. We'll bargain the Great Furnace. A lot of things to like here. So Cabal Ritual is nice. The Rowan's is nice. I think I'm going to take Cabal Ritual and Rowan's. The downside here is I might need to use the Songs of the Damned to get me going if I don't draw an initial mana source. Okay. I was hoping if I binned everything, I'd have a cycler, so I could cycle off this mana. That did not happen. So we'll go to our turn now. We discard a Dread Return. We'll use Fairy Macabre, exile a Dread Return, and lead the Stampede. We'll play the Lotus Petal. So if I use this, I only have 2 Lotus Petals left to win the game with. But I am going to use it here. We'll play Cabal Ritual with Threshold and Rowan's Grim Search. Bargain the Vault of Whispers. Take the Cabal Ritual, binning the other 3 cards. We'll play Cabal Ritual. Cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands. Dark Ritual. We'll use Fairy Macabre, exiling only the land grant. Cabal Ritual. Songs of the Damned for 8 mana. And Reaping the Graves. Fairy Macabre will be last. Street Wraith, Healer, Drannith Stinger, Horror of the Broken Lands, Fairy Macabre. So now we're going to cycle Street Wraith. I have not played a land yet. Songs of the Damned is a good find. We need another Rowan's Grim Search or Reaping the Graves. We'll cycle Stinger, another Songs, cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands, goodbye to Imposing Vantasaur. Street Wraith will bring me down to 8. I only have 2 draws left because these bottom 2 are both Fairy Macabre. So we're running on fumes here. Cycle the Barrenmoor, cycle Horror of the Broken Lands, Drannith Stinger, Monstrous Carabid. Okay, there we go. And now we'll cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands, play Dark Ritual, Songs of the Damned for 14, and now we can return the 2 copies of Fairy Macabre. I still have a land drop left, so I don't think I want to play Vault of Whispers. I think I'm going to Rowan's Grim Search just to draw 2, lose 2 life. Cycle the Drannith Healer, cycle Monstrous Carabid, Dark Ritual, and now we'll Reaping the Graves. I need red mana. Alright, we're returning all of our friends here. I'm not going to cycle with things on the stack. I have 25 mana floating. I just don't need to do that at this point. The only thing that really matters is finding red mana and then beginning to win the game. I'm going to move my hand to the end so that way I can see what I draw. And we'll begin by cycling a Horror of the Broken Lands. Our top card was, of course, Songs of the Damned, but that's okay. I don't need mana here. Another Reaping the Graves. Cycle Monstrous Carabid. There's a Lotus Petal. We'll play that. And now we'll play a Drannith Stinger. Cycle Imposing Vantasaur, and we have plenty of resources here to win the game. Our opponent concedes and we're off to game 3. I'm going to submit the same configuration and just hope for a reasonable draw in the 3rd game. Game 3, we're on the draw. Our opponent has kept 7. We don't have any mana, we just can't keep this. We will keep this one though. Get rid of the Rowan's Grim Search. They play Land Grant. They have a Mirror Shell Crab and Gorilla Shaman. They're playing red for Gorilla Shaman. That's not good for my hand. We'll play Vault of Whispers and pass. They play the Gatecreeper Vine. Yeah, I'm in trouble. Their hand is very good against what I'm doing. They grab the mountain and now they can play the Gorilla Shaman. Interesting, they're not going to. Maybe they're afraid that I'll kill it? I don't know. We draw the Great Furnace. I'm not even sure if I want to play that out, because if I do, they can just destroy it next turn. Cycle Street Wraith. You know what? I'll play it. So I think if I can tie up their mana using Gorilla Shaman next turn, they can't Mesmeric Fiend me. And then maybe there's a chance that I win on the following turn. So they play the Gorilla Shaman. We will cycle in response. Okay. And now they're going to Gorilla Shaman again. I will cycle the Drannith Healer. 4 creatures in my graveyard. Okay, I think we might be trying to win on our turn. I'm not sure, because they have the Mesmeric Fiend, so I don't see this getting any better. Ooh. This is going to be extremely thin margins if we pull this off. So we can Fairy Macabre here, exile the Land Grant, play the Lotus Petal, cast Songs of the Damned, play the Great Furnace, and we will Rowan's Grim Search. With the bargain, I'm going to pay a red. We need mana here. I'll take a Cabal Ritual. Revealing the Street Wraith is actually very good for us. Okay. We drew another Street Wraith. We'll cycle that. Life total is a resource. Boom! That's what I wanted to see. So we've played a land, and I have 2 Lotus Petals left to win the game with. We have to keep that in mind. Cycle the Horror of the Broken Lands. I'm not going to waste mana on Rowan's Grim Search. We'll cast Reaping the Graves. Street Wraith, Horror of the Broken Lands, Imposing Vantasaur. Okay, so we will cycle down to 8. Dark Ritual, that's a good one. Cycle Imposing Vantasaur. Fairy Macabre, I guess that makes a mana if I can find Songs of the Damned. Reaping the Graves, so Songs of the Damned is what we need here. Cycle. There we go! Alright. Cycle Imposing Vantasaur. Cabal Ritual. Okay, things are looking reasonable. We'll slide my graveyard up. Cycle Monstrous Carabid. Discard the Fairy Macabre. Target nothing. Songs of the Damned. Now we'll play Reaping the Graves. I'm at 8, so my life total does matter. I think we'll do 2 Street Wraith. Alright, so we'll cycle these 2 down to 4 life. There's the Lotus Petal. Actually, should I play out a Stinger and just start trying to win? I think the answer is yes. We're going to return everyone here. I don't think we can afford to waste mana in this game. So I'll play Petal, and now we'll play Drannith Stinger. We have 12 mana to win the game with. So we'll need a little bit more mana and another Reaping the Graves at some point. Maybe not the Reaping the Graves. Well, I drew the Reaping the Graves, so now we just need more mana. Another Stinger. Cycle. Dark Ritual, okay. Cycle the Imposing Vantasaur. They're at 14. Cycle the Drannith Healer. We draw into Horror of the Broken Lands, we'll cycle that. Songs of the Damned, we've got it. We just beat a Gorilla Shaman open. Nice. I love this. Kind of makes up for our variance in game number 1, to be honest. Alright, they're down to 9. The only thing you have to worry about at this point is not accidentally killing yourself, which I won't lie to you, I've done a number of times in my life, where I sort of just turn off my brain once I start cycling, and I start cycling Street Wraiths, and then I'm like, oops, I accidentally killed myself. So don't do that. I've accidentally also run out of mana, so pay attention to that. In fact, it's happened this league, but I was already in a winning spot, so it didn't matter. So keeping track of life and mana is relevant. We'll cycle another Drannith Stinger, cast Songs of the Damned, cast Songs of the Damned, and Reaping the Graves. Okay, we did it. We pulled it off. All right, we've defeated Spy Combo. How about that? We now improved to 4-0. In this beginner's instructional video, can we get a trophy? I certainly hope so. I will see you in match number 5. Looking to make playing your favorite combo deck much easier? Look no further than the Epic Storm Mini Combo Pack, which is available at theepicstorm.com/shop for $15.99. This token combo pack comes with 84 double-sided tokens featuring classic Storm and Mana tokens with new inclusions such as our modern Ruby Storm package, but that's not all. Our token pack covers a variety of formats from Pauper to CDH with new tokens. Stop on by theepicstorm.com/shop and make an easy decision to elevate your combo game. For the trophy, match number 5, we're on the play. Can we go undefeated? Well, this is certainly a great hand for potentially doing so. Alright, so with a hand like this, you're really just looking for rituals and more creatures. That's pretty much it. So there's not a lot to think about here. Like, you do have Rowan's Grim Search. This is a solid hand. Like, I think the only thing I would be concerned with is an explosive draw out of the opponent. Alright, it looks like they're on the Jund Wildfires deck that has a ton of like graveyard hate. They typically play 2 to 3 Nile Spellbombs and then 1 to 2 Bojuka Bogs. We will pass the turn. Twisted Landscape, and of course Nile Spellbomb. So we do not play main deck answers to graveyard hate, but you can beat it by being a little tricky. So you can look to like double Reaping the Graves to get through it, or get them to bite on a Songs of the Damned and then Reaping the Graves in response, that sort of thing. We'll play a Great Furnace, pass. They search out Basic Swamp. They play a Bridge. And it looks like they're going to pass the turn. I'm going to Rowan's Grim Search on the end step with the bargain. If they choose to Spellbomb here, I think I'm okay with it. We'll return the Reaping the Graves and Dark Ritual. We have 5 creatures in the graveyard now. We have plenty of mana. Play the Great Furnace, and I will pass the turn. So the only thing I really want now is more mana. They play Twisted Landscape, or mana for a Writhing Chrysalis. Sure. End step will cycle Horror of the Broken Lands, cycle the Barrenmoor. I'm going to get risky here and cycle the Healer. They could use the Spellbomb now, and it looks like they're not going to. Alright, I think it's time to win through this Nile Spellbomb. I hope you're ready. Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, cycle the Barrenmoor, and now we'll attempt a Songs of the Damned. Let's see if this resolves. It is possible to beat main deck graveyard hate, so if they respond here, we just Reaping the Graves in response. And then they exile 2 creatures, that's not the end of the world. And if they let it go, we have double Reaping the Graves, which will return everything. So they are going to respond. And now we'll Reaping the Graves. We have to determine what creature we want to leave. Or creatures, because there's actually going to be 2. I want Horror of the Broken Lands, Horror of the Broken Lands, Drannith Stinger, Horror of the Broken Lands. All right, so there's going to be 2 creatures that are exiled. They're both going to be monstrous Carabid. All right, so our graveyard is now exiled. This is on the stack. This does not have to resolve. You can cycle Street Wraith here and refill up your graveyard. And that's what we're going to do. Another Songs of the Damned. Oh boy. Okay, I'd love like a Dark Ritual here, just so that way we can juice up the Songs of the Damned even more. But we did not hit, so we're going to accept 6 mana. And now we're going to keep cycling. Cabal Ritual, we'll play that. And we're just going to keep cycling until we want to cast this Songs of the Damned, and then Reaping the Graves, play 2 Drannith Stingers, and win. Another Songs of the Damned. Okay, so mana is not a choke point. We'll cycle the Drannith Stinger. I love playing this deck because there's so many complex decisions that are all micro. Like, they're very small. The end game, most games, is similar. But there's a lot of small decisions you make that end up playing a big impact on the end result. And that's the kind of Magic I enjoy playing. Okay, so it looks like we're going to win game number 1. Like, a lot of people might look at this deck and go, well, you're just cycling cards and casting Songs of the Damned winning. I think that is such a bad view of the deck because there's so many things that led up to that point, like cycling order, sequencing, what you select off Rowan's Grim Search, playing around Graveyard Hate. The deck is insanely complex. Like, it might be the most complex Pauper deck there is. This is going to get a lot of people being like, well, actually, you're allowed to have your own opinion. That's okay. But I believe that this is the most complex Pauper deck. We've played our 2 copies of Drannith Stinger. We will cycle. All right, we are 1 game away from a trophy. So I was just checking the sideboard guide, and my memory of what the plan was completely different from reality. So this is a Cleansing Wildfire matchup. We want the Swamp. And in my mind, I knew that we wanted Siege Smash. What I forgot was we actually bring in the Blood Celebrant. Our opponent's deck is a Weather the Storm strategy, so that is what we would like here, because Blood Celebrant easily beats Weather the Storm. We're going to cut 1 Lotus Petal, 2 copies of Cabal Ritual, and then 1 copy of Imposing Vantasaur. Let's go. I believe we keep this. It's not an exciting hand, but I think it's fine. And a weird thing about it is, depending on the draw step, I might actually play out Lotus Petal on the first turn because it avoids duress. Let's see the draw. Okay, so I will play out the Lotus Petal now, because if our opponent plays duress on the second turn, I am not punished. And I have faced duress out of this deck previously. They play a bridge, refurbish Familiar. I will cycle Monstrous Carabid in response. Okay, it looks like we're going to end up discarding a Barrenmoor. I don't want to discard creatures because of things like Bojuka Bog, for example. We'll discard the Monstrous Carabid to draw. If I don't draw a land, I'll play the Barrenmoor. And I will pass. The Cleansing Wildfire. This is why we bring in the basic Swamp, right here. We'll grab it. They play a bridge. They have 4 cards in their hand. This could be a spot where I try to win. It really depends on our draw step and then what Street Wraith finds. Let's cycle a Street Wraith. We draw into Lotus Petal. Cycle Street Wraith. I'm a little concerned about filling up my graveyard here, but I think this is a good opportunity where they don't have Nile Spellbomb yet. We'll play the Dark Ritual. Cycle Drannith Healer. Cycle a Street Wraith. Alright, it looks like we're going to burn a Cabal Ritual. Cycle the Monstrous Carabid if Magic Online will let me. Here we go. Rowan's Grim Search. Well, that digs for things we want. I will cycle the Drannith Stinger. We will now cycle Imposing Vantasaur. We're a third of the way through our library. We'll play Cabal Ritual. Cycle the Healer into another Lotus Petal. We'll play Rowan's Grim Search with Bargain, sacrificing the Lotus Petal on the table. That was not great. So I need both Songs of the Damned and Reaping the Graves. Neither are there. I think we're getting rid of all 4. We drew the Siege Smash. This is why I don't like boarding in sideboard cards. Unfortunately, we have to pass. And if they Bojuka Bog me, we will be going to game 3. And there's the duress. Devastating. So we saw almost 50% of our deck that game without hitting a Reaping the Graves. We were 2 cards short of 50%. They take the Songs of the Damned, and now they swing. And now they're going to play a Lembas, Twisted Landscape. I'm going to just pass here. I can cycle Street Wraith on the end step. I'm at 8. I'm actually pretty close to being dead, because they are a Galvanic Blast deck. Another Refurbished Familiar. This can discard the Siege Smash. They play a land. Writhing Chrysalis, sure. So in order to win this, my draw step really needs to be like Reaping the Graves, and then we need to draw mana. The mana doesn't have to be Songs of the Damned, but we're more likely to win if it is. I will cycle Street Wraith. Dark Ritual. Let's see the draw. That is not good enough. So over 50% of the deck, we never found Reaping the Graves. Sometimes that is how Magic the Gathering plays out. We were 2 cards away. Alright, so heading to game 3 where we are on the play. I think I'm going to deviate from the sideboard guide. I'm going to bring in a Cabal Ritual and get rid of a Lotus Petal. With Blood Celebrant in the deck, I think we can get away with 2 Lotus Petals, and I'd rather have the extra mana burst from the Cabal Ritual. Sometimes it is acceptable to deviate. We are on the play. This has no creatures. It has everything else, but no creatures. I think this hand is actually a trap. Yeah, you have the Barrenmore, but I just don't know if I believe in this. I'm going to go to 6. This seems fine. We'll put Lotus Petal on the bottom. We'll play Vault of Whispers and pass. They play Bridge. We will cycle a Drannith Healer. We draw Imposing Vantasaur. Did not hit the land. We'll cycle the Imposing Vantasaur. Play the Barrenmore. Pass the turn. They play a Mountain. Is this a Cleansing Wildfire? It is. So this can get them a Swamp, and it does. We draw another Barrenmore. I'll cycle the Healer to see if I can draw an Artifact land. I don't. So now I'll play the Barrenmore and pass. They play a Blood Fountain. Interesting use of their black mana. So not a Refurbished Familiar or a Duress. Troublemaker Roof. So they're going to go after my Vault of Whispers. And we can bargain the Rowan's Grim Search here. Sacrifice the Vault of Whispers. I mean, I don't really want any of these. So we'll bin all 4. Oh, that was not good. We drew both Siege Smashes. This is the downside of bringing in sideboard cards that I talked about previously. They play Twisted Landscape and 2 Nile Spellbomb. Tough. So Great Furnace is my best draw here. We did not draw it. I will cycle Imposing Vantasaur. Play the Vault of Whispers and pass. They swing, I'll go to 16. A Writhing Chrysalis. Yeah. Now a Twisted Landscape. I will cycle a Drannith Stinger. If I don't draw Great Furnace, like, we're toast. Cycle the Stinger. The Swamp that would have been a Lotus Petal. I mean, I do want Swamp in the deck versus the Cleansing Wildfire strategy. It's just unfortunate that it's played out this way so far. Okay. Looks like we are slowly losing our trophy here. And Duress, this is going to tell them to use the Nile Spellbomb right away. Our opponent deliberates for a while and then activates the Nile Spellbomb. And now I have to Reaping the Graves for 2. For 3. We're probably toast here. Reaping the Graves. We'll return the other 2 copies of Drannith Stinger. So all 3 Drannith Stingers are coming home. And now there's only 2 Reaping the Graves left, and we're going to lose our graveyard full of creatures. They swing for 4. They could sacrifice the Eldrazi spawns to pump, but they don't. They play another land. We'll cycle Drannith Stinger. Another Vault of Whispers. We'll cycle Drannith Stinger. Horror of the Broken Lands. I could try to cast Horror of the Broken Lands and beat down to win. If they have any removal, I'm probably in trouble, but we do have double Siege Smash. Okay. The Cleansing Wildfire. And now another copy of Nile Spellbomb. I don't even know if I care about that at this point. They attack with the Writhing Chrysalis. I'm not going to block. I'm at 10. They're going to use the Nile Spellbomb. And now Weather the Storm to gain 9. Okay. We draw Dark Ritual. I will cycle Monstrous Carabid. They're at effectively 30. Like, I'm so far away from winning here. We'll cycle another Monstrous Carabid. I think I'm going to just pass. Maybe I should have just passed after the first cycle, because now if they swing, they have a 4-5. So I actually need to cycle into another cycler. They play a land. They do not swing. Okay. I think I'm going to just pass the turn here. We do have 2 Reaping the Graves left in the deck. Those are our best draws, because I might be able to power through this Horror of the Broken Lands. They play Eviscerator's Insight, and a basic Forest, and now a Lembas, and another Blood Fountain. So if I do kill this Writhing Chrysalis, they could just get it back eventually. They do not swing. We'll cycle the Monstrous Carabid. I think we just take our draw here. Another Street Wraith. I'm at 10. I think I'm going to just pass. End step, they're going to cast the Flashback on Eviscerator's Insight. They cycle a Twisted Landscape, 5 cards in their hand now. Refurbished Familiar. I will cycle a Drannith Stinger in response. We find another Stinger. I'll cycle the Stinger. Okay, I will now discard this Vault of Whispers that I do not care about. They play a Duress. This can take my Songs of the Damned, and it does. I don't even know how many of those I have left at this point. Apparently 3. That was my first Songs of the Damned. And now the other Duress. They use a Blood Token, getting rid of the Mountain. We finally draw Great Furnace, but it's way too late at this point. We can use Siege Smash to kill the Refurbished Familiar, but then they have Blood Fountain to bring it back, so I don't think that's a great idea. They play Fanatical Offering, and now they're going to use the map, and they reveal a Cast Down into another copy of Nile Spellbomb. So this is their 3rd Spellbomb of the game. They use it immediately. That's all of my Drannith Stingers are now in exile. And they drew the Cast Down for the horror. Alright, they got me. Like, I do wonder if maybe I should have tried to be a little bit more aggressive the previous 2 turns after I drew the Street Rates. Let's see if it lets me draw cards. No, it's not going to let me. Okay. So we went 4-1. Not bad. You got to see how to beat main deck Graveyard Hate. We got to use the Chitin Gravestalker beatdown early. We got to crush red. There was a lot of things to like about this league. We got to show off Drannith Healer. While I didn't go 5-0, hopefully it was very educational for you, the viewer, and Matthew Story, who donated for this beginner Cycle Storm video. If you liked it, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Support me. Let me know any feedback you have in the comment section down below on the video. I'd love to hear from you. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and as always, keep storming. That was a sweet donation deck. If you're interested in seeing your favorite combo deck here at the Epic Storm, visit theepicstorm.com/donation decks, where you can submit a deck to be featured here on this channel. And on top of that, if you're a higher member tier of this channel, like a Stormtrooper or a Combo Cabal, you get 50% off or even free. So there's tons of perks. Submit a donation deck today.